Hey guys, Matthew, and today I'm going to bring you guys a video on basically my league start recap for the initial weekend, how things went, how things are, and some findings, and also a little bit of testing that I did with some of the new skill, or the new mechanic, I should say, with Lowlife being on 50% with Petrified Blood, so being able to do Lowlife life-based. So I tested a lot of different things in the last few days when it came to my league starter. I'll basically be talking about everything and how things went. So obviously, we all know the league start was an absolute shit show. It was like impossible to actually play the game. It took me 5 hours to get to maps, but in reality, it took me 13 hours of the servers actually going live to get to maps. So I was spending more than half my time outside the game, just waiting in the queue, like all of you guys. So there was the whole issue with priority queue being given to different people. I was against the idea. I thought it made no real, it wasn't fair at the very least, especially due to the fact that they were giving priority queue to multiple people in different parties when only one person was like a content creator of those parties, for example. There was just a lot of issues with the whole priority queue, and I'm glad that GGG addressed this and said that going forward, there will no longer be priority queue ever. Of course, they also gave their reasoning for that, being that they were sponsoring big streamers, like, Double Lift, Shroud, and all that. So they didn't want those, sponsorships to just go completely out the window, which makes sense. All right, so I got to maps. Now I get to maps, and this is around the time where the server is at its worst. Honestly, it was pretty much impossible to even play at that point. So I actually decided to go back to Blood Aqueducts to farm in Blood Aqueducts instead of in maps, because I was actually losing my maps and I was rollbacking my entire maps. So I was like, well, if I do something that's very short, like, just farming the lane mechanics in Blood Aqueducts or something, that I can actually at least like get a few runs worth of value, and then when the server crashes and I come back, I can just do another few runs. So maybe I'll make like a chaos or two, and I was doing chaos recipe at that point when I got there at Blood Aqueducts. So I was able to make a little bit of currency doing that. Now, I'm not sure when it was, but on Saturday morning, my time, they actually fixed the server. I think it might have been around like 10 a.m. or something like that. So that was not quite 24 hours into the league, but almost an entire day before they actually said, okay, we're going to take the servers down for 40 minutes, and then we're going to put the servers back up, and, things actually were good from there. So during that entire time, pretty much until they decided to just put the servers down completely, I was actually farming Blood Aqueducts. So there's a lot of hours that I literally wasted farming Blood Aqueducts, and I say wasted because obviously farming Blood Aqueducts is not great for currency, but it was all right. So I kept playing when they actually fixed the server for maybe another 10 hours. I think I had, or not quite 10 hours, maybe 6 hours or so. When I logged off, I had 21 hours of playtime, and I had been streaming for over 30 something hours, like I think it was around 36. So again, lots and lots of downtime. But I logged off with 17 Exalts, if I remember correctly, pure, and my build, which consisted of basically the life version of the build, the POB that I showcased, which was like a 5-link Tremor Rod, a bunch of life rares that were just a couple chaos each, and of course, the Comb's Heart, which was actually fairly expensive this league. Something that I was I was quite surprised about, seeing Comb's Heart at somewhere around 150 chaos, like one day into the league. I personally bought mine for, I believe, somewhere around 40 chaos. That being said, I paid 2x for my 5-link Tremor Rod, which was definitely a lot more than I was expecting to pay. But with the server issues, with the massive lack of players at the in maps, even 20 hours into the league, it made sense that things were going to be expensive. Okay, so I got to maps, and I started maps with Arc, the same thing that I had used for leveling. And I got all the way up to, I believe, T5 maps when my damage started to just kind of, it wasn't there anymore. The damage was just not there anymore. T3 or T4 maps, actually, not even T5s. So that's when I bought the Tremor Rod. That's when I actually pulled the trigger. I had like 5 or so Exalts at that point, something like that, maybe 8 Exalts, all from Chaos Recipe almost exclusively. Chaos Recipe, and also I dropped 1 Exalt in a some of my earlier mapping, but that was right before I bought the Tremor Rod, actually. And I got an Exalt from the League Mechanic at that point. So I got pretty lucky. 2x, 1 League Mechanic, 1 dropped very early on, which allowed me to basically buy the Tremor Rod, but I already had the money just from Chaos Recipe because, you know, Chaos Recipe is very strong. I say to every league, it's very, very good. All the way up until Exalts around 70C is typically where I stop. But with the Chaos Recipe helping tool, it actually makes it that much better. Okay, so I buy the Tremor Rod and I'm still using Arc. Arc just felt so good for the League Mechanic, being able to clear the entire League Mechanic, being able to do the entirety of the League Mechanics every single wave without ever failing, and that pretty much was the case until around T10 maps. Right before I got into red maps, my damage on Arc started feeling a little bit flaccid, started feeling like I wasn't one-shotting the bosses anymore, started feeling a little bit rippy in the League Mechanic, the damage just wasn't really there anymore, and that's when I pulled the trigger and I swapped to Blazing Salvo, which was very simple. It was just a few gem slots that I was swapping around, as you guys saw in the POB, and then I started blasting T10s all the way up to T14s. It was basically a joke. When I got to T14, there was a pretty significant increase in difficulty, and when I got to T14s, I was still on a 5-link Tremor Rod. I was playing Blazing Salvo. I had my Combs Heart, 5.5k life, and in T14s, I had a very hard time with the League Mechanic. Outside of the League Mechanic, let's say I was doing just regular mapping, or for example, if I was doing the other League Mechanics, even things like Alva Temples and all that, the damage was perfectly fine. The survivability was fine with 5.5k life and another 2,000 or so from Steel Skin. The effective HP wasn't great, but it was enough to keep me alive for sure. But the League Mechanic was absolutely deadly. So I pretty much just stopped doing the League Mechanic almost entirely, or I would just do the first few waves because those were pretty easy, but I wouldn't try to push it too far in the League Mechanic because, like I said, it was way too rippy T14 plus. Even Conquerors, I was pretty much one-shotting Conquerors, but then somehow the actual League Mechanic was way harder. But not so much that I was lacking the damage, I was mostly lacking the survivability, and I didn't have the damage to just completely one-shot. So I needed the survivability to be able to actually tank a hit. So I pretty much did that until I went to sleep. I went to sleep with about 20 Exalts or so in the bank. No, I think it was 15, sorry. 15 Exalts in the bank is when I logged off. I logged on the next day. I kept blasting all the way up to Sirus. So as you can see, my Atlas is looking not too shabby. I've got Sirus down. I've got about 100 map completion. Things are not looking too bad. But of course, at this point, I've becoming, you know, more so focused on bossing than mapping. So I pretty much completely ignore the Atlas, and I'll just figure it out with the Maven Watchstones when it comes to getting Awakened level 8 and all that. Right.
Just need a moment to
so I played that until yesterday on a 5-link live version. And I started bossing. Conquerors were pretty easy peasy, nothing crazy. But when I got the Guardian maps, I was actually really surprised to see that for some reason in practice on the 5-link life-based version of the build, I was blasting Guardian maps, like absolutely blasting them. The Guardians were going down almost instantly. And for some reason, I was having massive issues. Like I even failed one of the Elder Guardian maps. Now it was a juicy map, 130 quantity or something. Sorry, and I nearly got it, but I actually failed it. And when I was doing the Shaper Guardians, people in chat were like, "Dude, you're doing ZDPS." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm legit doing no damage. Like, where is my damage? I don't get this." So I actually went back onto my old account, the one that I used to do the Zero Link Maven kill that I showcased the video of, and I tried to do the exact same thing. I tried to do a Zero Link Maven kill. I mean, I had done it on video. It's over there. You know, it wasn't the cleanest or whatever, but the damage was perfectly adequate. So I tried to do the exact same thing, the exact same setup, and for some reason, it was almost impossible. The damage felt probably half as good. And now that doesn't really make sense because they didn't nerf the build really at all. The only thing is they nerfed wave conviction exposure by 10%, but that's very little, which got me wondering what happened. I don't know. So I was doing some testing and we found out that sometimes when using Blazing Salvo, which never happened to me last league, but it's been happening this league, sometimes when I press detonate, it's going to blow up all my mines, as you just saw there. but sometimes it's going to detonate 2 of them, as you just saw there. Now, the problem is that if it detonates 2 of them, or 3 of them, or 5 of them, which seems to be completely random, the problem that happens is that it messes up your entire rotation. Because the rotation is that you would basically debuff, right? So you would go ahead and debuff, and I'm not sure why this skill can't be used. Oh yeah, right, because it's in my my Arcanist brand setup. So sometimes you would debuff, right? And then you would do all of your preloading, like front loading damage, and then you would just blast off the bosses, and then the sequence would just go and go and go, and then once it stops, you would do another sequence, and then you would have to debuff the boss again. Now, what's happening with this is that the debuffs are going through, but sometimes it's only popping 2 or 3 or 5 of your mines, which completely kills your entire sequence and your entire basically setup. So you'd have to re-throw down the mines, but at that point the boss has probably blinked away, or maybe blinked back on top of you, or whatever it is, right? And now you're in danger, so you can't actually do another complete sequence setup. So I'm not sure what they did, but I do know is that they messed up. Something's messed up because the build doesn't do what it was supposed to do in practice. Now, of course, being able to kill, you know, guardians and all the endgame content on a 5 link on the live version of the build is not necessarily, you know, something that's supposed to happen on any build, to be fair, right? That's maybe a little bit too strong. So when that happened, what I did is I decided to try the new mechanic, Petrified Blood. And the thing about Petrified Blood basically is that it allows you to go low life with 50% of your life reserved. And also take some damage as a dot portion, right? So what it does, essentially, Pain Attunement gives you 30% more spell damage on low life, which is pretty massive, right? 30% more damage. And when you're on low life, typically you're going to reserve some of your life, or maybe even all of your life, in order to get some more damage through auras. So what the Petrified Blood mechanic allows you to do is to use Petrified Blood on your life pool, then reserve an additional aura with life up to 50%, basically. And then Petrified Blood is only going to cover half of your HP now. So let's say you have 6,000 HP, now you only have 3,000, but like 40% or something of the damage that you take is going to be converted to dot damage over time. So it's going to be a dot that applies to you, and that over time is going to, you know, tick down. So you can easily just flask it up, and it's going to basically take care of the dot damage, and it's going to bring you back to full, but your new full is half. The thing about this is that a miner is too squishy to use that mechanic. I tried it, and honestly, I was dying pretty much every single map with that mechanic. My damage was a lot higher on paper, but since I had to move around so much more, since I wasn't able to actually, you know, set up anything, because if I just stopped moving for half a second, I would just die, I decided that I didn't like it very much. So I tried to push it as much as possible, but it just wasn't really working. So I had, I think around like 17x at that point in the bank, because I had, you know, purchased some items and all that, did some little bit of gambling with Breachstone farming and all that. And also I tried to do the hidden invitation, the one for the Breachstones, and I failed 3 in a row. Now, to be fair, that is probably the hardest one. It's even harder than the Feared when it comes to a miner build. Now, why is that? Because a miner does damage while stationary, right? You have to basically set up your entire damage in order to do damage. You got to do the entire setup. You can't really do that on a miner in that invitation because there's stuff everywhere. So you have to basically keep running while trying to do damage, which means no sequence, no debuffing, nothing like that, which makes it very, very, very hard until you have enough damage to just one-shot them entirely. At that point, it stops being, you know, it stops mattering because you're just one-shotting them anyways, which is pretty much the point that I'm at right now. So yeah, after failing 3 of those in a row, and the actual lead mechanic ultimatums being nearly impossible, or at least feeling nearly impossible, I was like, dude, this is not good. I'm done. Like, I was like, no, I don't want to play this anymore. The miner sucks. I hate my life, and it just wasn't a good time. And the biggest reason for that, it was not the build itself, it was the bug that I spoke about, where sometimes it just detonates a couple of your mines and it screws up your entire front loaded damage. And that's the whole reason why you're playing a miner, is the front loaded damage. If you're not getting that front loaded damage, you're not doing any damage on a miner, so it's really, really bad. All right, so I decided to pull the trigger, and I invested pretty much the entirety of my currency, which, like I said, was somewhere around like 17x, and I went low life. Not only low life, I also got my 6-link. So now we got the 6-link Tremor Rod, we've got the 5-link Shavs, we got the Presence, a bunch of rares, we got the Mark of the Shaper, Cinder Swallow. We basically have almost the entire setup, pretty much. That is part of the medium POB, as you saw in my both the Link Maven kill was done on this current build that I'm playing, and also when I spoke about the build in the build guide, I also have a POB for this specific build. This build right now can farm the Feared, can farm pretty much every single endgame boss. The only thing that it can't do is pretty much the Hidden, and even then it can do it. It can actually definitely do it, but in order to be able to do it, you have to basically probably do them white, and there is some RNG involved with which one of the bosses you get first. So for example, if you get Esh or even Thul first, that's the best case scenario. If you get something like Oln the Thul first, you don't really care too much. So you have to get one of the really annoying ones, which hits the entire arena, which is pretty much Esh and Thul. Get one of these two, blast them because you can one-shot them, and then move on to the next one, blast them because you one-shot them. So long as you basically don't let the arena get completely messed up, you'll be fine. If you ever get the arena completely get like full of crap, that'll just, you're not going to be able to finish the encounter. Okay, so basic recap. Went from life to low life, tried out some Petrified blood action, tried out, the new mechanics and all that. Didn't work out too well. The build works extremely well for bossing. It's not very good for mapping, which is something that I had already said in the build guide video. That was never meant to be a mapping character. It was meant to be a bossing character, and it does that incredibly well. Now the problem is, I'll be making another video about where to make currency in the game with the new Path of Exile, right? Because it's actually maybe even somewhat worse than I had expected it to be. But that's pretty much my recap on my initial weekend. I've made about 30-ish exalts so far in about 30 hours of playtime, so about 1 exalt per hour from the league start, basically, or hours spent in the game. Now, of course, in the first multiple hours I made 0 currency because I was leveling and all that, which means at some point I started making a little bit more, maybe 2x an hour to make up for those hours. But it seems like those 5x per hour, 10x per hour, 20x per hour methods of making currency are pretty much all completely gone from the game. But like I said, I'll be addressing that in another video. So hopefully you guys are enjoying the build. It works incredibly well for low tier content and for bossing, but when you do get to those higher tier red maps, you might start struggling. Don't worry, it's not just you. Now, to be fair, there's a lot of skill involved in playing this build when it comes to the mapping portion of it, to be able to do the things like the ultimatums. And the best tip I can give you is keep moving. So keep moving, like always. Just keep moving. Detonate, move, detonate, move, detonate, move, throw mines. Like, just never stop moving. If you ever stop moving, trust me, you will die. But basically, give up the whole idea of the sequencing and the massive damage, and just keep moving, and you'll actually be able to do the ultimatums, at least the first like 4 or 5 waves in every single map, no matter what. Or at least I was able to do it, even in the juiciest of T16 maps with like multiple curses on me and all that stuff. It still works fine. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the recap. Before I go, as always, I want to say a huge thank you to my supporters: Flame Scorpion, Richard, Willie, Alex, Jordan, Emil, Raymond, Tim, Scott, Lost with the Map, Grimoire, Nathaniel, Cremis, Justin, Kevin, the other Justin, So Nice, Axel, Mercury, and Bizen. So it's a massive thank you to everybody listed here, everybody else who has supported me in the past, and anybody else who wishes to remain anonymous. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.